Good evening, folks, and welcome, and thanks for coming. Tonight we'll be doing an exploration of the Urantia Book, and we're going to have a good time doing it. My name is Michael Hanna. I live here in Ashland with my wonderful, lovely, talented wife, Donna. And we've been reading the Urantia Book together now for nearly 50 years, 5 decades. That means that we're slow readers and that we find something fascinating about it every time we open it up. And so tonight, I'm just a reader. I don't represent anyone or speak for any group or any organization. I'm just a guy who's a reader. And I'm here to say I want to share what I think is something pretty special. And so tonight will be my personal observation and perspective about what the book is, what I've learned, and why it's grabbed my attention and held it after all these years. So initially, I have to say that we'll be going on a journey. That's the plan. And it will involve 3 stories. And we'll go back as far as we can go. We'll go back to the beginning of the beginnings, in a universe perspective of the origins. And then we'll look at our planet, and we'll see the origins of our planet, and we'll see where it came from, the evolution. We'll talk about ice ages, we'll talk about cavemen and women, we'll talk about something you've probably not heard of, 6 colored races. We'll talk about the 5 evolutionary epochal revelations, okay? And then the last story will be the story about us in the future, our mortal ascension plan. So we're going to have a good time doing that. And to bear this in mind, whatever I say tonight will be just a flicker of light, tip of the iceberg, spray on the ocean, a fleeting glimpse of the vast cosmos. So, and you may hear names and dates and concepts and numbers that you're not familiar with, but don't worry about that. You can look those up in the book. Everything I say will be in the book. Look those up later. In the meantime, just relax, have a good time, and just enjoy the journey here. So let's get started, dive into the book itself and the word Urantia. According to the authors of the book, Urantia is simply the universe name for Earth, okay? And so if you break it down, U is your, RAN is the word for, the heavenly word for, the Greek word for Uranus, one of the personifications of the sky god, like the planet Uranus. And then TIA is place. You put them together, your heavenly place. Where? In the cosmos. So that etymology alone indicates the scope in which the book attempts to present itself. So let's talk about some of the facts of the book. It was, yes?
I'm just curious, who wrote the book?
Well, we'll get to all that.
Okay.
At the end. Save all these questions because there's going to be a multitude of questions, no doubt. And let's start at the beginning, which would address yours somewhat. The book was first what they call indicted or put down on paper in 1934. And then it was published by the Urantia Foundation in 1955. And as you can see, it's a hefty tome. It's 2,097 pages, over 1 million words, comprised of 196 papers. Papers instead of chapters. And so naturally the question is, who wrote the Urantia book and what does it claim to be? Well, the authors are indicated in the front of the book, and they are celestial beings. No human takes credit for any of the authorship within the book. And the authors, as it's indicated in the front of the book, have names that we've never heard of before. Divine Counselor, Mighty Messenger, One without name and number. These are celestial beings with the names that are presented to us, plus a midway or commission. So these names are the ones that they say are the authors of the book. Now, what does it claim to be? It claims to be the fifth epochal revelation, okay? And it indicates that through these names and what the information has in it, that we're not alone. We're not cosmic orphans. That there are invisible beings outside the range of our physical senses that are on this planet now, even in this room with us tonight. As far as what the book is, let's first start by saying what it is not. It's not a religious book. Religion is a personal spiritual experience. There's no church, there's no authority, there's no leader, there's no organization to join, there's no guru. It's essentially just this book, more like a book club. And so that's basically, I'm giving a book review of this book tonight. And it's an invitation to think. And so what do people say about the book? When you hear references, many people love it or they haven't even gotten into it. But these days, the first thing we do is check with AI to see what AI has to say about it, right? And so I did, and it gives sheets and sheets about what it is. And so I consolidated it into some highlights and asked it what it thinks of the thinking of the book, its philosophic acumen, and the quality of the writing. And so it says that it's profound, precise, extraordinary, transcends human authorship, beyond normal human perception, and articulates truth beyond the grasp of ordinary human understanding. You might expect that from the claim that it's from superhuman intelligence to get that kind of review from AI, which is pretty accurate. And essentially what it tries to do is weave together science, philosophy, and religion into a cosmic whole, in a modern perspective. So, having said that, it's not for everyone. The sentences are long, the concepts are dense, many of the papers are hard to understand. Okay? Well then, why should you read it? Well, you read it just because you get value out of it, just like anything else. Why would you do something unless you're going to get value? And if you have questions, big questions, then it has big answers, and therein lies the value. Questions like, who am I? Who are you? Why are you here? Where are you going? Is there life in the universe besides us? What about angels? Are they real? What about God? Is God real? Is God always a he? What about the feminine mother side of things? And what about this guy, the devil? Is he real? And why is there injustice, pain, suffering, inequity, inequality? These are questions. And primarily, what is the meaning of life? And what about Jesus? What did he have to say? What was his teaching? And finally, is there life after death? These are the questions that people have, and here is by way of celestial beings telling us what the answer is. So these are big questions with big answers, but then the next question is, should you believe it? Well, don't believe it just because AI said it, or I said I like it, or somebody else says it, or because it's old, or it comes from an authority figure, or or any other reason. You believe it, only you don't want to be tricked in your belief. You only believe things if it's true and it's real. So how do you know if it's true or real? If anything, you try to refute it. You try and take it apart and use all of your understanding in life to refute the thing that's offered to you to believe. And at that point, you have to challenge yourself to question your initial assumptions, your preconceived opinions, settled ideas, long-standing prejudice. Challenge yourself to say, well, I want to be an independent cosmic thinker, a courageous, independent cosmic thinker. You don't need to accept scientific dictation, religious dogma, or social usage. You have to try to refute what's told to believe and then test your gut for it and then see if you have a reality response to what you have been presented with. And if you come to a point where you can't refute what you're presented with, and then you try it again and you can't refute it, then at that point, you're on sacred ground because you have found something that's true. And when you find something that's true, then you believe it. And to believe something is one of the supreme acts of being a human being. Animals can't believe. Humans have that capacity to do that. When you do it, you're on something that's true. Then you have you feel that vacuum within your life that you found gold. One time, someone asked the thinker, philosopher Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, whether he believed in God. He was in his 80s. And he said, no, I don't believe. I know. How does he know? Because he tried to refute it and he passed it through all these tests and he came to that point to where he knows, which is a pretty fantastic place to be. Okay, so let's crack it open and look inside and see what this book says. It's broken into 4 parts, and each building on the others to present a cosmic or a comprehensive point of view. And this is how it's laid out in this little chart here that my talented son made for me. So part 1 is the central and super universe. It's the big picture. It's the master universe. It's about God, the universal Father, the Isle of Paradise. It talks about a place called Havona. It talks about the Paradise Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. The big picture, the wholeness. And we're all part of the whole. This represents the whole. Part 2 is the local universe. It's our neighborhood within the super universe. Within this local universe, think of contracting concentric circles. You have the local universe, constellation, systems, and individual planets. All of that is described in the local universe part 2. Part 3 is the history of Urantia, which is the story of Earth. It talks about the origins of the planet, life implantation, the first 2 human beings, they give them a name, Andon and Fanta. It talks about the evolution of life, and then the 6 colored races that we'll talk about. We'll talk about these in detail later. And then part 4 is the longest part of the book, 775 pages of the life and teachings of Jesus. Talks about his birth, his childhood, his adolescence, his public ministry, his crucifixion, his resurrection and post-resurrection appearances. And it presents Jesus in a fresh, universal, and deeply human way. So what sets this book apart, besides the fact that it's claimed to be written by superhuman beings and intelligences? Well, it says that it's a revelation. And so then it distinguishes what is a revelation. It says there's two kinds of revelation. The first is personal, for yourself, in your own spiritual life. True religion is a personal spiritual experience. And what is religion? The word religion means bound back. Religion. Bound back where? Not in time, but eternity. Personal spiritual experience. So you have your own personal spiritual experience, creature with the Creator, God with man and women. It's an intimate, ongoing, continuous relationship. So that's true religion. Personal spiritual experience. Personal meaning that it's yours. Spiritual meaning that it's not a material activity, not a mindal activity, but it's on that third level of spirituality. So together, that's personal spiritual experience. It's true religion. Through that process, you get revelation. It's personal. It's for you. It's intimate. So that's the first one. The second, revelation, is for the planet, for everybody. And it occurs periodically, and in this case, in our world, to all inhabited worlds, material beings come down to the planet. They have a mission to upgrade humanity, to do their job, which is to enlighten, assist, and uplift the worlds. And we'll talk about that in detail as we go on. And it says now, of these planetary revelations, there's been 5 of them as a background for our world. So there's personal revelation, now there's planetary, and there's been 5 of them. So what are they? So we'll just touch on them. And we'll talk about some dates and times and everything, but don't worry about that. We'll get into a little bit more later. But the first epochal revelation comes when humans, as they evolve, humans rise up from the humus. That's what humans are. They rise up from the humus, and then they evolve through time, and then they reach a plateau. And upon reaching that plateau, we are ascending beings, but then descending beings come to help us. And the first epochal revelation is 500,000 years ago. And it was, and I'll just touch on it, was a planetary prince with his 100 corporeal associates. They landed at a place called, which would be now Turkey in the Middle East. It's now underwater. But their mission was to teach humanity technology, brick making, writing, and other aspects of that. We'll talk, like I said, we'll talk about that later. But Prince Caligasti, unfortunately, joined the Lucifer Rebellion, and that entire revelation came to an inglorious end. So moving forward from 500,000 years ago to the next one, 38,000 years ago, another planetary revelation occurred, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve's mission was not technological but biological, to genetically uplift humanity. They were supposed to come here, have children in the garden, and then their children's children would propagate and aid humans in their genetic uplift. Okay? But they went not into rebellion, but into default. Again, we'll talk about this in detail later. So now, that's the first and the second. So now there's a third epochal revelation. And this was 4,000 years ago. So 500,000, 38, and now 4. So who was this spirit being that came down 4,000 years ago? You probably heard his name, Melchizedek. He's in Genesis known as the Sage of Salem, which is now Jerusalem. Okay? And he had a mission to upgrade humanity's thinking. We were going from polytheism to monotheism, and he was very successful. And he also set the stage for the 4th epochal revelation, which was Jesus of Nazareth, 2,000 years ago. And Jesus was divinity became humanity. He revealed God as a loving father and humanity as a brotherhood and sisterhood. He ended the Lucifer rebellion and left behind the spirit of truth to all humanity. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit later. So now those are the 4 epochal revelations. So now 2,000 years have passed, and we have forgotten all of this. And ancient mythology incorporates the Prince Caligastia, and Adam and Eve is now a story about a snake. Melchizedek is a vague name. Jesus' teaching has been westernized, wrapped into theology with the church built around it, and the truth of his teachings flickers like a candle in the corner. So now the 5th epochal revelation to revive all this is the Urantia Book. It's here to restate what happened before, coordinated and authoritative elimination of error. And it's not the final word. It's not a stop sign, but an arrow pointing toward the next 1,000 years. Okay, so each one of these revelations lifts the world a little bit higher, and this is where we stand today. So that's kind of the background of the whole thing. So and it forms the backbone of this entire story. So now let's move from this to my little poster that I put together. And let's look at the big picture. This ties into part 1 of the book. So let's just go through it very briefly. This, obviously, is our little planet Earth. It's part of a local universe. And the local universe of many are within this 7th super universe. The Milky Way galaxy is the center. 7th of these 7 other super universes between 1 and 6. They circulate around this perfect central universe, what they call Havona. And this is comprised of 1 billion perfect worlds. And the center of all things is the Isle of Paradise, the geographic center of infinity. It's outside of time and space. It's stationary. All of this, 7 super universes, is called the grand universe. The grand universe is contained within the 4 outer space levels. 1, secondary, tertiary, and quartan. So this whole thing is the master universe. Now moving back down to the Milky Way galaxy, think of contracting concentric circles. You've got the local universe, then you have constellations, systems, and individual planets. Our planet, Urantia, they call it 606, number 606 in the universe, is on the ragged edge of the Milky Way galaxy. So that's where we start our story here. And we take a look at what the actual Urantia Book says about what has happened from the origins to right now. So this book, the Urantia Book, sits on the shelf in this wonderful library, along with all these other books and these other writers, all toiling in the vineyard of the muse. They have one thing in common. They all tell a story. And so tonight, we're going to tell 3 stories. 3 interconnected stories that will unfold together. The first story is of the master universe. There is in the mind of God a plan which embraces every creature of all his vast domains. And this plan is an eternal purpose of boundless opportunity, unlimited progress, and endless life, and the infinite treasures of such a matchless career are yours for the striving. So this big picture, the widest picture of reality, is what we'll explore. We'll talk about the beginning of beginnings. The second story is the story of time and space and how that came into existence. The creation of the 7 super universes, including our Milky Way, the birth of our local universe, the creative Mother Spirit and the Creator Son, who created the local universe, our planet's long history, the 5 colored races, and the 5 epochal revelations. That's the second story. The third story is the story of us, the story of the mortal ascension plan and our personal destiny. It's the story that we're living right here and now. Okay? So let's start our journey in the first story, the big picture, the story of the master universe. So in order to understand our destiny, we first have to understand our history and our origins. So what's the path to this understanding? Normally, the human mind would want to approach things from the simple and the finite to the complex and the infinite, from human origins to divine destinies. That would be fine. It would reveal facts, but not truth. The path does not lead to spiritual wisdom. Such a procedure leads to a form of genetic knowledge, but doesn't tell us anything about our divine destiny. You don't get to the truth by consequences, you get to the truth by sources. So in this way, we won't go from the bottom to the top, from man to God. We'll go from top down and outward, from God to man. So in order to start our journey, let's take a break. Let's relax for a moment, take a breather, and prepare ourselves and use our imaginations. Okay? Let the world fall quiet for a moment. And imagine that we're outside on a warm summer evening. Now imagine looking up at the beautiful starlit night. The air is still, the sky is clear, and the stars, they shine like diamonds on a jeweler's velvet cloth. As we look up, the question naturally arises, where did all this come from? This is the search for origins, and it's the deepest journey that a mind can make. So deep inside, we have these questions. We know that the questions are bigger than the galaxies and the answers are older than time. We look up at the cosmos, and what does the word cosmos mean? It comes from the Greek word harmony. And so let's see tonight if we can find harmony in science, philosophy, and religion and make sense of all of this. See if the first cause of science, of how things work, can coordinate with philosophy, the unifier of what things mean, and have it in harmony with religion, God, the creator of why anything exists at all. So that the first cause of science is also the unifier of philosophy, is also the universal Father. Let's see if we can coordinate all this tonight. Somewhere between the quark and the creator lies the truth of the story that we're about to explore. Okay? So now, we know that the universe is big, it's old, it's wild, and the mind wants to know, well, what started all this vast sky-lit night? Everything has a cause. Nothing begets nothing. From nothing comes nothing. Okay, so let's look at science and we say, well, what is the answer there? Well, it's the Big Bang. Well, who or what lit the fuse for the Big Bang? And what actually exploded? Electrons, neutrinos, quarks. Where did they come from? Gravity? Well, we know that gravity holds the galaxies together, but who made gravity? And where did the space come from for it to explode into? Right? And what force keeps it exploding? What propels it forward like sparks from a cosmic anvil? Well, to answer that, we have to travel, take a little journey here, a long journey, a deep journey. And we start with the exploration of the eternal past. And we look deep into space. Use our imaginations as far back as we can go. Possibly go in concept in our imagination. We see the stars, but let's go beyond the stars. Let's go beyond the Milky Way. Not just the Big Bang, but let's go back further. Go back before time and space. Go back to a moment before moments. But at that point, there is no before, because there is no ticking clock, no flowing river of time. So as we go back deeper and deeper, beyond space, beyond matter, beyond energy, back to a moment before moments existed, back before the beginning of the beginnings. So now where are we? We hit our conceptual limits. We run into the edge of our abilities. We find ourselves dealing with words like infinity and eternity. But now we have a problem, because finite minds cannot comprehend infinity. A pint can't hold a quart. Okay? So, nevertheless, everything needs a beginning, because that's how our minds work. Even if it doesn't have a beginning, we'll make one up. We need a starting point. But the infinite does neither, and that's where our adventure begins. Okay? So if we allow our minds to travel back that far, we're up against what we might call the zero age. And that's referenced here. I just use this just as this circle here as the zero age. What is that? It's really not a factual reality, but it's a starting point. It's a place where we give it a name. It's a conceptual, hypothetical state before reality, before space, before time. It's not a moment in time, because time doesn't exist yet at that point. It's an imagined moment, a mental doorway into the mystery. So, not a factual reality, because there can be no facts, because facts require time and space. But we can hold a valid concept as a way of thinking to have a starting point that precedes all beginnings. So let's stay with this for a second. Thinking about this zero age is like, it's like counting. Let's just say the number 0 on a 12-inch ruler. The 0 is really not a thing, but yet it gives meaning to everything that follows after that. And in counting, the number 1 is the first real number, yet behind it stands the concept of 0. 0 is not a factual reality, but it's a valid and necessary idea. It's where counting begins, even though itself is not countable. Okay? So you have to have some place to start, and we'll call it the zero age. So now we've got this zero age, now what? Our minds start to think, well, who made that? That we need a creator, a controller, a first source and center. Religions have dealt with this throughout the ages, and they've come up with names. The first cause, the uncaused cause, okay? They even came up with father, but they gave up on that term because then they say, well, who's your father? And who's his grandfather? So that doesn't work. To stop this infinite regression of names, they have all agreed on this name. You've probably heard it, the I am. I am. It's a valid concept and not a factual reality. It's a tool for thinking and a way for us to begin the journey. So now imagine the I am within the zero age. At that point, there is no outside. There's no beyond. There's no before. The I am is self-sufficient unto himself, self-contained, self-sustaining. There is a within, but no beyond. An eternal present with no past or future. Nothing precedes him, nothing surrounds him, nothing supports him. He simply is. He is the I am. Okay? Within this zero age contains total unity. Completely still. Static doesn't mean lifeless. It means resting, unmoving, utterly stable. Quietness beyond silence. Stillness beyond stillness. But there's a problem. The I am exists alone, and he lacks one thing. He lacks relationship. The I am does not want to be in eternal solitude. He longs to love, he longs to share, he longs to express. So to make room for anything beyond himself, the I am conceives of a plan. And in order for this plan to exist, he has to withdraw from total infinity and make room for what we would call reality. So there's total deity first, and then there's reality. And this is the first movement from the zero age. Okay, you could, in this dawn of eternity, God makes a jailbreak. He makes a prison break from total infinity. And now, the first thing that the I am does is to express himself like a facet of a diamond, as personalized, and he's God. The I am expresses himself as God. Now, God is actual. Before, reality was potential. The master universe was in potential. Now it's actualized in the personality of God. God now shares his creatorship with an equal co-partner, the universal mother. The two together form the infinite spirit. The three together now comprise the infinite Trinity. This is important because all this is important, but this is especially so because the infinite Trinity now represents the whole. And at this point, after the universal mother and the infinite spirit, God becomes the universal Father. He's part of the whole. He's the absolute part, but he voluntarily is in cooperative subordination to the whole. The whole represents everything. We're part of the whole in this relationship. Now, it's not a solitary existence, but a relationship. And as down to us as humans, many feel hopeless, despair, and alone. But the truth is that we're all children of God who has created us without duplicate in infinity. Will creatures we are, irreplaceable in all eternity. The Father's love individualizes each personality, sharply silhouetting each unique being against the impersonal levels of reality. The majority of human beings are truly rich, but they refuse to believe it. Our life is a gift from God. What we do with our life is our reciprocal gift to God. Knowing that you are a part of the whole gives you meaning and power to live. It's like buttoning the top button of your shirt. All the other buttons line up. We're telling a story tonight, but what is our story? We're the authors and the editors of our own life story because we're part of a bigger picture. Only you can be you. Only you can dance your dance. Only you can sing, love, and be loved. Walk, talk, and play the way you can. You are special. Only you can sing your song. Don't let your music die. The world needs the light that's in each one of us. It gives you purpose because you're a contributor. As moves the part, so moves the whole. Your life, you could say, is a brick in the cosmic cathedral. If you don't place that brick, the cathedral will still rise, but it won't contain your brick. As moves the part, so moves the whole. As grows the whole, so grows the part. Even if you think you're a drop of water in the ocean, if that drop was missing, the ocean would not be the same. You belong to something bigger. You're connected to a larger reality. The whole, the cosmic matrix of the infinite Trinity includes all things and beings. And within our life, everything is temporary. You enjoy something, it will pass. If you're feeling sad, don't worry, that too will pass. Utilize our time because we're special. Young people should use their youth like a whip on a galloping horse. Older people like me who realize that like the waves that make their way toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end. I don't wear a watch because I already know what time it is. The time is now. If you want to do something, now's the time to do it. The great task of life is to give birth to your true self and then grow into your better self. So now at this point, the infinite Trinity needs a place to stand, just like we all are standing in something substantial, something underneath to stand on, something substantial. So they then create the Isle of Paradise. The Isle of Paradise is the foundation. It's the absolute center of all material things. It's motionless, changeless, eternal. It's not part of any universe. It's the platform upon which universes will be built upon. Surrounding paradise, then the now paradise infinite Trinity builds Havona. These are 7 concentric circles comprising 1 billion worlds of perfection, existential perfection with no beginning, no ending, inhabited by perfect beings. This is the expression of the Paradise Trinity. The Trinity and Paradise have established. So it's a first great act, not a singular act, but a collective act to create Havona. It's not created in time because time is not yet existing. It's brought into being as a perfect expression of a divine harmony of the Paradise Trinity. So here, at this point, perfection is not a goal, but a starting point. It's a bridge between the infinite and the finite, the eternal pattern for all future universes. Okay, so now let's take an inventory and see where we are. The story expands from the zero age to the Trinity, from the Trinity to paradise, from paradise to Havona, from Havona to now expanding outward to the evolutionary universes, from existential creation to evolutionary existence. We are evolutionary beings. From the infinite to the finite, from the one to the many. This is where we begin the second story. The second story is the finite story. With Havona in place, the Trinity now has a living arena. And the Universal Father proposes to the Mother and to the Son, let us do the opposite of perfection. Let us create imperfection. Not existential with no beginning and no ending. Let's have experiential, a place of evolution, a place of time beginnings and no ending. A place of time and space where beginnings who begin to evolve, and let them have a goal to be perfect, even as God himself is perfect. This is the beginning of the birth of the 7 super universes. Beyond Havona, the 7 super universes and the master universe now has a future. These realms, they grow, they change, they become. And through their becoming, the Father and the Mother and the Spirit all interact, whereas the Father gives love, the Mother gives mercy, and the Infinite Spirit gives ministry through the angelic creation. So, at this point now, how does all this happen to create these universes of time and space? First off, it has to be said that it's not time and space, it's space and motion. Everything is in motion, from quarks to atoms to electrons, our bodies, all the most minute, what they call automatons, everything is moving. Time itself is just a measurement of that motion. Time is the measurement of the chronicity of motion. Time is how we measure movement. Everything moves, quarks to galaxies, except paradise, which is motionless and outside of space. That has to be understood as a background. So what happens? How does this get created? Now, we're going to now move through time and space at a rapid pace. So we'll talk about millions, billions, millions, and thousands of years. So just hang on to your hat here as we move forward. These what they're called primary force organizers. They go out into space and prepare the foundation for these local universes, systems that will eventually turn into super universes. They spin off energy wheels, shape nebula, and carve out local universes, constellations, and systems, and individual planets. And us, we live in this place. It's where we live, move, and have our being inside this unfolding plan. So these primary force organizers, they are beings, they have a job, they have these powers. They go out and in a vast aggregation of suns, dark islands, spirals, planets, carve out 1/7 of the space section of the evolutionary universes, and they eventually form galaxies. And of these 7 super universes make up the grand universe. So now, just for a moment, let's talk about size and proportion. This is the Milky Way galaxy. These are the 7 super universes of which we are part, compared to the 4 outer space levels. What is the size? And all of the stars we can see with our naked eye are within this local system. So we're talking about massive proportions. If we were to take the grand universe, which includes the central universe in the Isle of Paradise, central universe, 7 supers make the grand, and put them inside the first outer space level, it would have as much comparative elbow room, you could say, as one navel orange would have inside the planet Earth if the Earth were hollow. And then the second, tertiary, and quartan levels are all much bigger than the first outer space level. So, from another important point to make is that apart from the size of the stars and the galaxies, from a cosmic point of view, we are more important than these gigantic creations. We're not just bags of meat or portable assemblages of portable plumbing, but we're living children of the Creator God. Stars are huge, but essentially they're made of dust and incandescent gas, okay? We have personalities that will outlive these stars. The stars will burn out, but we'll continue to live on forever because we're connected to God, and God is infinite. So let's take a look at now what happens after these super universes are created. Again, we're going to move forward quickly in time. The Paradise Force organizers, it turns out that when you look at it from that point of view, there are many Big Bangs. We just happen to be seeing this one and call it one, but throughout the greater grand universe, there are many. So, here, the local universe then spins off what you would call a mother wheel. And this mother wheel gives birth to generations of suns. Our sun being here, billions of years pass. And our sun gave birth to our solar system. It happened by what they call, even in science, called a gravity explosion event, to where during one of its periodic convulsions, a dark gravity body came by and pulled the solar tongue out from its roots, and that consolidated down into our solar system. And eventually, millions of years pass, volcanic action, oceans cool down, and we end up with a more stable planet that's ready to receive life. The stage is set for life. How does that happen? It doesn't happen by way of organic soup and then lightning bolts hit it and then it starts to bubble up, and over a period of time then you have life. No, it has to, life begets life. And so from the local universe, you are sent what's called life carriers. And these life carriers, 500 million years ago, I'll drop that number in, so billions, millions to 500 million years ago, begins life, and it plants in 3 locations, Africa, the Americas, and what was now Australia. And from those places, life took origin. And it grows through these major stages that we all know about: algae, sponges, invertebrate, early marine life, birds, dinosaurs, mammals, horses. All of that climbs up through the evolutionary process to eventually to where you ice ages, mid-mammals, to eventually to where you get to primates, and then apes go one way, develop their big toe, humans develop the other way, develop their thumb. But the main thing is that the early primates develop their brain. Their brain then reaches a point to where it can make contact with the mind circuits of the creative mother spirit of the local universe. So from animal to now reach a point of what you can call humans. Why? Because they make a first moral decision. They can know the difference between right and wrong. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's their choice. They become what they call mortals of free will dignity. Okay, so up from the humus, onward to now making contact with the creative mother spirit. They give names to these first 2 human beings, Andon and Fanta. And they made this decision in southwestern Asia, which is now, that section is now underwater. Any life form that was developing in Africa or any of these other places were a form of pre-human life. Actual humanity requires the growth of their brain to the point to where they can make these moral decisions. So up from the humus, it's slow process, slow evolution, thousands of years pass until we reach again that plateau of development. And during the 4th and 5th ice age, turns out to be now 500,000 years ago. This Andon and Fanta was 1 million years ago. You could put an anchor point there as to when humans started, 1 million years ago. But time moves forward, and now you've got 2 things that happened that were profound. The first was the origin of 6 colored races: red, yellow, blue, orange, green, and indigo. They appeared in a single family, which is now in Central Asia. And from this single point, these races spread outward like spokes in a wheel. The red race went over the Bering Strait, can't point to that, but they went over the Bering land bridge into North America. They became the ancestors of the Native American people. The yellow race migrated eastward toward Asia and China. The blue race went westward into Europe, became the early European stock, mixed with the Neanderthals. Orange, green, and indigo moved across the Mediterranean southward. The orange, and these were the giants. They had a strain of giants in the orange and the green. The green killed the orange, and the indigo killed the green. And the indigo race migrated southward into Africa and became the ancestors of the African people. So that was going on with the human race. Now, they reach, again, this plateau we talked about. The second major event occurred, again, this 500,000 years ago. And it's this first epochal revelation. Now, in order to give perspective of all what's going on, we have to give a larger cosmic setting to the whole thing and pull back and look down from the Milky Way from above. You've got these constellations, and you've got systems, and everyone has a ruler. Our leader of our system was Lucifer. He's called the system sovereign. His first lieutenant was Satan. And every world has a planetary prince. And our planetary prince was a being called Caligastia. So Caligastia, in his corporeal staff of 100, came down around the Persian Gulf near Mesopotamia, which is now underwater. And if you look in, like, the History Channel, they talk about ancient aliens and UFOs. Well, there's roots of truth to that, but they weren't mortal beings from other worlds. They were spirit beings who came down visiting our planet. Spirit beings who live on another level, materialized on our world. They had a job, and their purpose was to teach humans the fundamentals of civilization, technology, agriculture, horticulture, domestication of animals, advanced brick making, writing, improved business. And they had 10 divisions of aid and succor to the humans: weaving, pottery, praying, and religious service, sanitation and hygiene. These were visible beings, tactile beings, universe representatives, teaching about our place in the universe and helping us learn about life after death. The plan was by slow evolution, not revolution by revelation. This whole arrangement continued for a long time, 300,000 years actually, until it was suddenly terminated by planetary succession, the Lucifer Rebellion. Lucifer, a brilliant leader, rejects the divine plan and issues what he calls the Lucifer Manifesto. Satan spreads the doctrine. Caligastia joined the rebellion and betrays Earth. The result: spiritual isolation, darkened circuits, and a long planetary setback. So what are these three elements of the Lucifer Manifesto that everybody bought in? Not everybody, but many of them bought into. The first one is that there is no God. Sophistry. The use of they said that there was using fallacious arguments to deceive the humans, that it was a waste of time for all this slow process, and that mind was infallible. The second was, since there's no God, there's no hierarchy, and then use anarchy, anti-hierarchy, anarchy. There's no recognition of authority, and that all mortal training was just a waste of time. There's no hierarchy, so therefore all levels should be flattened as a form of anarchy. And the third part of the Lucifer Manifesto was nihilism, that life is meaningless, the rejection of all religious and moral principles. So this ended up in a disaster. What is disaster? Disaster, separate from the stars. Disaster. And for 7 years, Lucifer versus Gabriel took place. So, just as a side point, the fate of the ones, so they lost their immortality, these Caligastia 100, and the helpers that they were meant to live on indefinitely, they ended up having bodies that deteriorated, and they traveled west to Greece, where they were known as, with their superior bodies, Thor and Neptune and Zeus. And one of them had a child named Hercules. So there's this mythology, but there's roots of truth in what happened. Those beings were eventually, they died because they were no longer able to live by way of the tree of life. That's what they survived on. So now, years pass, and time for the next epochal revelation Adam and Eve, like we talked about before. They arrived 38,000 years ago. They were what's called a material son and daughter of the local system. They portrayed the Father in heaven to all the evolutionary peoples, and they established their place on the eastern side of the Mediterranean, which eventually went underwater over a period of years. And their mission, they had a mission, was to not technological like I was saying, but biological, upgrade the human race and advance DNA and genetics. They were supposed to have children, then their children would multiply to 1 million, and then they would go out and upgrade the world. They would have produced higher spirituality, greater music, artistic appreciation. Women would have an easier childbirth, heightened sensibilities to truth and beauty and goodness. All of this was part of the major plan, but they went into default. Not rebellion like Caligastia in the 100, but a default. They made a mistake. Eve went with a brilliant leader from a neighboring tribe to speed up the plan, have a child with this leader from a neighboring tribe. The child would then be part of that tribe and accelerate the genetic planetary improvement, because this does take a long time. Eve met with this leader, had sex with him that night. Adam found out about it, could not live without her. It's a beautiful love story in a way, but the mind circuits were disconnected, and they found themselves alone on this darkened, besotted planet. So they lost their immortality, and after 400 years they died. But they left behind traces of the germplasm that now still uplifts humanity. So time moves on, and now we've had the third epochal revelation. We've had Caligastia and the 100, Adam and Eve, and now comes time for the third epochal revelation. It took place 4,000 years ago in the Middle East at a place called which then he moved, Melchizedek, and he moved to Salem, which we are saying is now Jerusalem, and he became known as the Sage of Salem. You can see in Genesis, they talk about him as one without mother or father. They call him God in Genesis because he just appeared. And at that time, his cardinal precepts for teaching was trust and faith, primarily to resurrect and reinforce monotheism, one God in the place of many gods, and set the stage for the fourth epochal revelation. Melchizedek became a great priest, and his full name was Macaventa Melchizedek, and his chief student was Abraham. If you look at National Geographic, they point to Abraham as the father of the three major world religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But Abraham got his teachings from Melchizedek. From Abraham, then came Moses. Moses started the Hebrew religion. This set the stage for the fourth epochal revelation. But now here we have to, again, pull back and look at the local universe down. In the local universe, and I use this picture of Jesus here, the local universe is designed to contain 10 million worlds, inhabited worlds. And the two creators, what they call Michael, which is not his real name, but the translation of the word Michael means like God, and his consort is creative mother spirit, the daughter, infinite daughter. The two of them bring forth life within this local universe. angels, Melchizedeks, what they call Lananandeks, life carriers, Adam and Eve's, and mortals capable of knowing God all the way down. So the context in which these two operate, she is place, he is direction. Everything within the local universe is mind energy. She represents, she's the mindal womb of the local universe. He is direction. He then lives the life of each one of their created sons and daughters. So he lives the life of a Melchizedek, of a planetary prince, of a life carrier, and each level to know the life existence of the beings that they create, not just abstractly, but experientially, to live the life of that child. So he incarnated from Michael to a planetary prince to an Adam to a Melchizedek, all the way down to his seventh and final bestowal as a mortal being, and he became, well, we named him Jesus. So Jesus is the world in which he completed his seventh and final bestowal. He was born in 7 BC, August 21st at high noon in Bethlehem. He was a divine being incarnated into humanity. He revealed the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man. His core mission was love, service, and also included terminating the Lucifer rebellion. And when he left, after 36 years, 7 months, and 17 days, he left behind the spirit of truth. And everything he did was successfully restore our planetary direction. That was 2,000 years ago. So now we look at our planet today. What's the condition? 2,000 years. Again, humanity has forgotten our cosmic history. We have a form of amnesia. The rebellion is reduced to a myth with Thor and Zeus and all the rest of it. Adam and Eve became a story about the snake. Melchizedek and monotheism teachings of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man have been obscured. Theology and institutions now overshadow the whole spiritual message. The teachings of Jesus now flicker in the corner. And so now it's time for the fifth epochal revelation, the Urantia papers. The whole point is to be a composite work, not by one human or living personality, but a book. It arrives in 1934, and it restates the life and teachings of Jesus, and it's given as an emergency revelation to clarify truth and to eliminate confusion. It's intended to prepare humanity for the next stage of planetary progress. And what are the stages of planetary progress? We go through these various stages. First, it's the struggle for existence. Then it's food and security and survival. And then we reach where we are now, the material comfort era. We're supposed to evolve and grow through this to what's called the era of knowledge and wisdom, the quality of thinking. It's the next human goal. And then beyond that, we're supposed to move into, and all inhabited worlds do this, move into stages of light and life. What's that? That's where war disappears, disease fades, governments unify, religion matures into a personal, living, spiritual experience. None of us would qualify to live in that era. We would be kicked out. So now, let's look at the story, the cosmic arc of what we're talking about. From the zero age to the Trinity, from the Trinity to paradise and Havona, from Havona to the seven super universes, the super universes to the local universe, from Michael and the creative Mother Spirit to rebellion to default, to Melchizedek, to Jesus, to the Urantia Book. And we live inside this unfolding master universe, conceived in the dawn of eternity, and now we're living it out in time and space. So now, let's bring it home. This is the beginning of the third story, the story about us. We've looked at the story of origins. We looked at the creation of time and space. Story 3 is a narrative of the mortal ascension plan. From dust to paradise, from the ascension plan is long and glorious, and it begins with us. And here's what's important that the book says about our lives. That there's 3 energy levels of reality: matter, mind, and spirit. That's all there is, this tripart reality that we live in. Matter, the atoms, the rocks, the dust of our material bodies, is the bottom level. The next is our minds, our consciousness. It's how we think. This is an energy level. We're exchanging a reality here. We can't touch it, but we're exchanging mind energy. And then the third is spirit. We need a bucket to place not material things or mindful things, but things of love, of truth, beauty, and goodness. We need a place for that, and that's the spirit level. And that's all there is. Things, meanings, values. Values of love and truth and beauty. These are values that you feel. And you learn these things with science, philosophy, and religion. Beauty, truth, goodness, fact, idea, ideal. So these are the things that we work with: science, philosophy, and religion. And we, as personalities, God-given personalities, unique personalities, without duplicate in the universe, integrate these 3 things. We work to coordinate, harmonize science, philosophy, and religion. There's no antagonism in the true sense between these energies. We learn to live with them and coordinate them in order to make a cosmic whole. So that's a job of our personalities. So what else is important about our existence? The main thing, of course, is our physical bodies. This is the biological vehicle that we inhabit. It serves as the seat of our earthly identity. It's a sensory experience, temporary, evolving, and indispensable to life on earth, a physical body. And then the mind, which we're saying, it's not the brain, that'd be the hardware. The mind is the software. The mind is what connects to the universe mother spirit. She has what they call adjutant mind spirits that reach down into our physical body. And we know them through levels. From the animals have the first 5, we have the next 2 of the 7. Intuition, understanding, courage, knowledge, counsel. Animals have those 5. And then the last 2, worship and wisdom. It's a mind circuit, and you evolve through those. Andon and Fanta reached those last 2, worship and wisdom, and became mortals of free will dignity, humans. Mind is the workshop. It's the energy system of the Creator Mother Spirit. Mind is the arena of choice, where you think, you reason. It's where you choose. It's where you live or you die. The other part, so we've got body, mind, and now we have personality. This is the unique part, a gift from God. It's the unrepeatable you. It's not mind, it's not soul, it's not body. It doesn't evolve. It's permanent in the presence of change. This is where the universal Father bestows uniqueness, individuality within the unity. No angel, no creator son, no cosmic administrator gives it. It makes you irreplaceable in the universe. It's a gift from God. Now, when we talk about God, this is the other thing that makes us who we are. Body, mind, personality, and now the greatest gift, you could say, is that a fragment of God indwells each one of us. It's a fragment of God, lives within each human mind. God is infinite. We can't contain infinity, almost like the Pacific Ocean. We can't take the entire Pacific Ocean, but we can take a droplet. And that droplet is within our minds. Not 50%, it's 100% God. And they call this God a thought adjuster. It's your thoughts, but they adjust it. And it's a divine presence that inspires us to go essentially to paradise. So now, you've got body, mind, personality, the thought adjuster, and now you have this other thing called the soul. How do you get this soul? When you are 5 or 6 years old, you make your first moral decision, and the spark of God comes from paradise to indwell us. You don't have it as a baby because your brains aren't mature enough, but when you make that first moral decision, you are the mother, you could say, and this fragment of God is the father. Together, you create this soul. It's a super additive consequence of humanity and divinity. The soul is eventually the thing that carries with us all the way through after death. So let's talk about that briefly, because we're coming toward the end of the third story. What happens after death? The physical body dies, the brain dissolves, the mind disconnects from the energy circuits because of the body no longer able to be in contact. So when the brain dies, the more material mind ceases. But the soul survives. The soul is transported by a transport seraphim to another planet, what they call the mansion worlds. On the mansion worlds, we awaken in the mansion world number 1. At that point, you have a new body, and you reunite with the thought adjuster, who carries the transcript of your human life, your personality, and your soul, all combined or inserted, you could say. I guess that's what it is. Inserted into this new material body. So, the thought adjuster, your personality, and the soul, this is the resurrection. This is the continuation of life in your new Urantia. That's what they call mansion world body, mansion world existence. You're the same person. You don't become someone else. You're the same person with your personality, but it's in a new body, in a new place. And they talk about what the place is like. We won't. Everything I say is in the book. So now what? You're in the mansion worlds. Here's this. You die, you go to the mansion world number 1. You have the new body, and then you go through these 7 mansion worlds. This is the center. And then from here, you learn, you grow, you coordinate with other beings from other local universes. And you move forward through the system, the constellation, the local universe where you get to meet Jesus, wouldn't be Jesus, but that would be the name we call him. Here in the local universe, our world is known as the world of the cross and the creative Mother Spirit. And then you move forward through the capital of the super universe. And then from there, you make your way, what they call the dark gravity belts that surround this, onto Havona. And you live on each one of these 1 billion worlds. And you learn, each world is different, and you learn something on each world. You're an entirely new person in terms of who you are. And then you make your way into see the infinite spirit, the eternal mother, and then the universal father on paradise. And then from there, you just don't hang around in paradise. You always have something to do. You join what they call the core of mortal finality. From there, you have become perfect, even as the Father in heaven is perfect. Not in a universal sense with all his superpowers or anything like that, but perfect in purpose, direction. And you then go out to the other 7 super universes as leaders, administrators, and teachers. And look, not at this point, but the future is the 4 outer space levels. And they say that when you reach here, that then is the primary or elementary course, which confronts the face-tested and much traveled, what they call pilgrims of space. Long before reaching Havona, these ascendant children of time have learned to feast upon uncertainty, to fatten upon disappointment, to enthuse over apparent defeat, to invigorate in the presence of difficulties, to exhibit indomitable courage in the face of immensity, and to exercise unconquerable faith when confronted with the challenge of the inexplicable. Long since, the battle cry of these pilgrims became, in liaison with God, nothing, absolutely nothing is impossible. So now here we reach to the end of the story. Story 1 is the eternal origins, paradise, Trinity, Havona. Story 2, the finite creation, time, space, super universes, Nebadon. Story 3, evolution, the ascent from dust to divinity. They reveal where everything came from, how everything is unfolding, and where we're going. The whole cosmic story in one breath is the zero age to the Trinity, from paradise and Havona to the super universes, from the local universes to Urantia, from a rebellion to revelation, from mortal struggle to paradise perfection, from finalators to outer space levels, from the finite to the infinite. So all of us with our tiny, shiny, mortal brains are all part of this. And they say that love of adventure, curiosity, dread of monotony, these traits inherent involving human nature were not put there just to aggravate and annoy you during your short sojourn on earth, but rather to suggest to you that death is only the beginning of an endless career of adventure, an everlasting life of anticipation, an eternal voyage of discovery. Finally, you all may be learning about the Urantia Book tonight, maybe for the first time, but there's a reason. Maybe it's part of your journey. I'll leave you with the line from the book that there are no blind and unforeseen accidents in the cosmos, and the higher orders of beings will not help the lower orders of beings who refuse to act upon their light of truth. And there's a quote from the book that I'll finish with, that Jesus left behind the Spirit of truth. And they say that having started out on the way to life everlasting, having accepted the assignment and received your orders to advance, do not fear the dangers of human forgetfulness or mortal inconstancy. Do not be troubled with doubts of failure or by perplexing confusion. Do not falter and question your status and standing, for in every dark hour, at every crossroad in the forward struggle, the Spirit of truth will always speak, saying, "This is the way." So that's the end of tonight's talk, and I thank you. So, it is.
You read your book in under 90 minutes.
Really like the way you set it up.
Thank you. Thank you. I've done my best to consolidate those three stories. As you can see, that it really is just the tip of the iceberg, spray on the ocean, and a small part of the big picture. In this book, they go into the details of all of these aspects. And again, try to refute it. I mean, if you can't, you've encountered truth for me. Any questions at this point? I may not be able to answer, but everything I have said is in there. And if you want to know more detail, then just take a look at it and read it. It's 1,000,000 words, so it's a lot of words.
Well, to me, it's interesting that another element of the Urantia book is the growth of God to supreme. That all of the mortals in all of creation, every life experience is a composite element of God the Supreme. Because God wants to know everything and have every experience. So it's part of God creating a creature and then learning from the creature, from all of his creatures.
Yeah. Yeah. Finite
Over 50
expression.
years.
I thought so. You're bringing up the evolutionary stream. Nice.
I have a question.
Sure.
What brought you to the Urantia book in your life?
I heard someone mention it, and I inquired about it, and was first given another book to read to see whether I qualified to read this.
So, Berkeley.
It was in Berkeley, and it was Man's Search for Meaning that was recommended to me by Viktor Frankl. And I read that, and I go, okay, I like that, but what about this? And it finally gave it to me, and I read it. And I remember reading the first 100 pages in my kitchen table under a light, and was amazed at what I was reading. And again, tried to refute it along the way. It's like, oh, this can't be true or real. It's too good to be true. How could I be receiving information from superhuman beings? It sounds like science fiction. But it coordinated with what I knew pertaining to history and science and scant knowledge of philosophy, and it was a point of view that really grabbed my attention and just held it there with the beautiful language, if nothing else. I don't know if you're acquainted with the language and the way it's written, but there'll be a time when there's the Urantia book as literature.
Okay.
It's written in superb literature way. That really does transcend the ability of a human to do it. And the fact that it was written in 1934, way before computers, and it coordinates all these historical facts and scientific knowledge, and embraces this vast arc of history, makes you, how could this possibly be done by any human at that time? And then for no human to take credit for it, if you were to produce such a work. Number one, it would take you massive numbers of years. You'd have to account for your absence in the library for all that time to your spouse and friends. What are you doing? And how do you know all this information? Not only that, but it coordinates with knowledge that we know today that's consistent with the PhD level in science and physics and archaeology and history, and it's a matter of like how could this possibly be? And the easier answer is it is what it says it is, rather than it's something that it's not. And the only way it could be not is if a human were involved. And anything time a human gets involved, you can't really keep it a secret. They want credit, or something leaks out to where you get a clue that this super genius, and there's no such person, would be able to produce it. And so that's just one way of looking at it. The other is your own life experience to say, well, this is true, the way I read it here. They talk about, there's a section in there about marriage and family life in the early humans. And you go from hordes to clans to tribes to super tribes, and you see how the evolution of government evolves in a very realistic way, and how we can see it happen today. And it's consistent with truth, and then beauty and goodness is coordinated with this beautiful presentation of the writing. Truth, beauty, goodness, woven together in an exquisite literary way. It's quite, remarkable. Donna and I read it all the time. And it's a great thing for a marriage. In fact, we have undergone a project, I guess a year ago, where other Urantians said, well, let's read one section a day, and it'll take 6 years. So we decided to go ahead and do it. We've never done it in 50 years, 47 years, we've never done it. And we thought, well, let's do this. And now we're on page like 480 or something, but it's a fun thing to do, to just sit down and then try and read these complex sentences. We just finished a paper on energy, mind, and matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's above our heads, but we thought, well, let's roll up our sleeves and learn about atomic cohesion and atoms and what they call automatons, and we kind of get it. We should take our time and we'll just go over a sentence. If I don't get one part, she will illuminate it for me, and vice versa. So that's what turned out to be a fun thing for us in our marriage.
Our glue line.
Yeah, that's
You do it, the glue line.
that's a word, and it's in modern science they use that word, and kind of corresponds with these words in the book. So
Where do you get the book?
where
Where do you get the book?
Amazon.
you
they
get
have
it on
here,
Amazon?
too.
I think they have it at Barnes and Noble usually too.
And we have donor copies.
Yeah.
What kind?
I have a few
Loaner
extras in my
copies.
house in Ashland.
And there's one in this library.
Okay.
Yeah. And really, the life and teachings of Jesus in the back of the 775 pages is a tour de force
It's beautiful.
discussion about, again, his birth, his childhood, the lost years of Jesus is what people ask about. And it puts it into a cosmic perspective as to who he was before this earth life, and to realize that we are all pretty lucky, you could say, gifted to beyond this world, beyond this planet. And when they talk about how our world is known as the world of the cross, and other visitors from other planets take no notice of our little obscure, besotted little world over here until they find out that it was the seventh and final bestow of Jesus, and then they become focused on the interest of us. And it seems in a way at first, when you first realize that we are at the bottom of the evolutionary scale, and it seems kind of unfair in a way, but then the more you think about it, you realize that, was it Lao Tse or something said that the value of an empty vessel is that it can be filled. And here we go from the bottom, literally to the bottom of evolutionary beings, to become what they call glorified mortals. Other personalities, other beings start at different levels, and they know what they know, but none of them will know everything that we know, because they don't start at the bottom like us. We have experienced life from the dregs of the world, you could say, all the way up through. And then the beings that do this journey from dust to paradise end up getting a name in the book. It's called, one of them is called Mighty Messenger. And this being was a one-time mortal. And maybe in Super Universe number 1 or whatever, and ended up going through all these stages and phases through Havana to the Isle of Paradise, and now is sent back to our world to write a paper on energy, mind, and matter. And that personality was a one-time mortal like us, just clunking around as a mortal being, and yet shows that that is a grand and glorious future for all of us. If he or she, we don't know, he or she can do it, then we can do it too.
With God, all things are possible.
And that was the last line in that sentence there. In liaison with God, all things are possible. And then in a way, you know, we tend to read it and somehow kind of get an affinity and appreciation for these other personalities like this Mighty Messenger, and especially like for Adam and Eve. We talk about them frequently. It's like Eve, you know, must, you know, really feel sad that she did what she did, and then Adam the same way. But they are now, they lived their lives. They died around 400 years old, and they went through the mansion worlds, but now they have been elevated by the Creator's Son, Jesus.
They
Repented, and now they're elevated to a place what's called the 4 and 20 counselors, which is his esteemed position. It's on that 4 and 20, these are the ones that make decisions for the system of these 1,000 worlds. And who's on that 4 and 20 is Melchizedek, John the Baptist, the leaders of these 6 evolutionary colored races. Every one of them had a leader, like the red man had leadership in the man named, long name, Anamanalontan. He lived around the redwoods 60,000 years ago. And he brought his tribe together and lived to be 90 years old plus, but was one of the greatest people, not just of the red race, but of all humans, is now elevated on the 4 and 20 counselors. And then the indigo race had a similar leader. The yellow race had a similar, they're all been elevated to this esteemed, august position.
Well, as have Andon and Fanta.
Andon and Fanta.
Moses,
And Moses.
Van,
same line.
is Van up there too?
Yeah, I think Van's on it as well.
He may have been in one of those rotating,
Rotating.
yeah, there's like
Uh-huh.
seats that are vacant and then are filled by people coming and going. But Van, another tremendous, and Amadon, his mortal associate, are heroes that now we feel like we get to know. There's another great love story of a man called Adam's son and Rata. Adam and Eve had their first son, Adamson, and after they left the first garden in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, they crossed the desert to the second garden between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And their first son, Adamson, left that second garden and went north, and he found a woman who was a descendant from Caligastia's 100. And the two of them had children. And that connection is a love story, not only because of what they did, but the children that they produced. Because they were superhuman beings, here's something really interesting. Adamson and Rata was her name. She was the descendant of one of the Caligastia 100, the Loyalists. Adamson and Rata had children, and their fourth child, because these were superhuman beings, still had that genetic superhuman power. Their fourth child was invisible, often invisible, and that child mated with their other siblings to the point to where now they're called secondary midwayers. They're the ones that make contact with humans. They're the ones that let Peter out of jail by loosening the lock. They're the ones that were involved in putting this book together because they can make contact with material things. Secondary midwayers, midway between angels and humans. And they're these invisible beings that they may be here now. Compared to primary midwayers. Who were the primary midwayers? Those were the children from the Caligastia 100. Then that's a fantastic story right there. So Caligastia comes down here. He has this job, and he brings with him 100 associates from the mansion world's up here, Jerusalem. They have 100 human associates. The rebellion takes place, and 60 of the 100 go into rebellion. And all of them were living from the tree of life, which was a real thing. And this tree of life gave them this chemical reaction that they could survive forever by way of eating this fruit. When they went into rebellion, they lost that circuit power. They went into default. That tree of life was taken by the loyalists. And this is where Van and Amadon come in. These were loyal supporters of the divine plan. They did not go into rebellion. And Van and Amadon took this tree of life, and because they had this immortality programmed in them, they lived for 150,000 years, promoted this idea of a second epochal revelation to come, and that's where they got volunteers and found this place on the eastern side of the Mediterranean called Eden. They call it Eden because the name in the mansion world's Jerusalem is Edentia. So then they prepared this garden for Adam and Eve to come. And then they talk about Adam and Eve, 8 feet tall, they glowed. They give a lot of details. Yeah. So that's all I have to say, really.
That's all.
And I'm glad you came.